Pixel Sift.
Hello and welcome to episode 143 of Pixel Sift, the show dedicated to indie games from Australia and around the world. My name is Fiona and joining me tonight is my co-host Daniel. Hey, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Fiona. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. And our guest this week is Theo Kipen from Not Dead Design, and he's here to tell us all about their game Karna Quest. Thanks for joining us, Theo.
Bye.
But before that, we get into the game. What are we taking a look at, Daniel?
So with the return of the long-dormant Half-Life series, this week with VR title Half-Life Alyx, we want to know what video game series would you like to see return?
All right, let's get into it.
Hey there, if you're enjoying the show and you want to hear more, subscribe to Pixel Sift on Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, or listen on pixelsift.com.au. See you there.
So last week, Valve announced the return of the Half-Life series with VR title Half-Life Alyx. And this comes as a surprise for two reasons, because not only is Valve returning to the world of Half-Life, but also the first time they've released a game since 2007. And going through the brief history of the Half-Life series, in May of 2006, Valve announced a trilogy of episodic games that would continue Half-Life 2's story. And so if we look at a brief timeline about Half-Life, we have the first Half-Life coming out in 1998, Half-Life 2 6 years later in 2004, which went on a little bit longer than Valve wanted to as far as development cycles. And after that, we've also got Half-Life 2 Episode 1 in 2006, and then in 2007 with Orange Box, Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And since then, 13 years later, we finally have Half-Life Alyx. And so it's very interesting to think about. Theo, if you had to come back and develop an IP after a hiatus, how would you approach it?
I think it's very dependent on the IP, right? So I feel as though with Half-Life, like the ideal would have been just been like, boy, howdy, Gordon Freeman, you've been gone for a long time. You keep doing this. But it really depends on the IP and like what creative decisions you want to be making, right?
Definitely. And I think an important point to think about too is just the zeitgeist at the time and collective consciousness, because some things stay true in people, in people's hearts, especially like Half-Life, which has been teased, the elusive Half-Life 3 for such a long time. I think that people remember and they still are hungry for that IP, that genre. And so, yeah, it's all very interesting because I personally haven't played Half-Life Alyx, but it looks like there's been a lot of leaps and bounds in terms of the gameplay. And also I'm hearing that there's story elements that Valve is starting to tie together to the old game. So people still get like a sense of the plot's being pushed forward, even though when you look at the story of Half-Life, Alyx takes, I think it's 5 years before Half-Life 2. And so there's that element to think about as well. Theo, would you think that is it different, obviously, like if you take a break from working on a game for like, say, a week or two just to maybe recover from burnout or just to do other things in that sort of stuff, would it be different than, again, like you said, leaving it for such a long time? What's the difference like there?
Well, like I'm weird. Like I decided like 3 years ago about this time. I feel as though Kana Quest is like my way forward as in a career, and so I just started working on that non-stop from then on in. Like I would take maybe a couple of days off for like Christmas, or most notably like PAX last year or in 2017 when I did that. But apart from those times, it was pretty much just like, oh, keep on working. So honestly, I would have no idea. Yeah.
Is it difficult?
Sorry?
Trying to jump back in after like even just a few days. I can imagine like you've got your mind out of that headspace of developing. Is it difficult trying to jump back in and be like, okay, what needs to be done and all of that?
Sometimes, yeah. Like, because Kana Quest had always, okay, once it started proper production, it was like very much like, these are the tasks I got to do, and sometimes I just like forget a task and I put it on the back burner. And that's mostly what would happen is I would just forget about a thing, and some of those things I just habitually kept forgetting to do until they launched in the final game, because like, no one actually cares. But yeah,
I guess
like,
one of the main things too for development cycles, when you consider a company like Valve and indie development, inherently very, very different as far as development times and even just the length of stuff coming out. Because I know a couple of other developers that have been working on projects for over a decade at this point, and they're still going back to it constantly and refining it, you know? So it hasn't really taken a break so much as just continued to be worked on in such a long period of time.
Yeah, like in the situation of like a game that's taken like 10 years, that screams to me like you're in development hell and you actually need to stop working on it and come back to it and make some decisions. Whereas like Kana Quest only took 3 years because I was like the first 18 months I was working entirely on my own, and that's a lot of work to do. At no point was I ever like waffling on creative decisions. The decisions were essentially made. I just had to make the thing. Whereas you hear stories from like the development of Diablo 3, where they waffled on massive creative decisions throughout the entire process, and same with like Anthem. Yeah, just huge problems.
Do you think that indie devs, because there are quite a few, like you said, you started off just by yourself. Do you think indie devs are given a little bit more leeway when it takes a long period of time because they may not have all of the team supporting them? Oh,
sorry.
No, that's all right.
My Discord decided to not do the thing.
Oh, good. Just wait for you. There we are. So my question was, like yourself when you began, you started by yourself, and some indie devs are either by themselves or have a very, very small team. Do you think they have a bit more of a leeway, or fans are a little bit more lenient to indie devs when they take a long period of time as opposed to the AAA titles that have hundreds of people working on the games?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, there are very few people who've gotten angry at me, or like no one was like going, "Oh my god, I need Kana Quest in my life." Like, I fucking love the little Kana. Like, I need to know what's happening next. Like, will Car like finally punch in the face, like in the reserves? Like, no one's really doing that. Whereas like Half-Life, it's like, oh shit, I've forgotten his name. Alex's dad. Like he spoilers. He dies at the end of episode 2. Like, what's going to happen?
Dude, and cliffhanger.
13 years later, we still don't know what happens. And like, like for Half-Life, I got to the point where it's like, just tell me that it's cancelled. Tell me that it's cancelled so I can move on. Whereas like Kana Quest, like, no one was really looking forward to it like before. Like, I kind of had to try and make people care where previously they didn't, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. If you're just tuning into Pixel Sift, we're talking about the recent revival of the Half-Life series and other game series that have been delayed over the years.
Now, another game that has had a reboot after a hiatus is Doom. So Doom was rebooted back in 2016, and then the previous Doom title before that was released in 2012, and all that was a HD remaster of Doom 3, which was released in 2005. But also a little side note, on pixelsift.com.au, you can actually find a recent interview that Daniel did with Mick Gordon, who's the composer of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. And one thing he said was that the reboot was combining the ingredients of what made the original special in a modern context. So, Theo, why do you think that older IPs are making a comeback? Do you reckon it's because they're a bit more financially secure, or there's just better technology?
I think it's a bit of a combination of both, but also like oftentimes with those older IPs, there is often a nugget of creative gold that makes those IPs great. And like in the case of Doom, they're like, what is the core of what made like the original Doom games so beloved? And like personally, I didn't hate Doom 3 as much as a lot of other people did, but I will be the first to admit that like it was a complete thematic break from Doom 1 and 2, right? And I think they were like, okay, well, what's that creative nugget, that core of that idea? How do we express that, right? And often personally, I think if you take that nugget and you work with it and try to keep what is there, but let it take you in new and interesting directions, I think that's where it is the most interesting. And that's why I think like the 2016 Doom reboot was so good. Whereas, what's an example of one which like fell short? Oh, it's not an official reboot, but it's basically a reboot like Mighty Number 9, where it's like, this is a Mega Man game, and we're just gonna keep the original idea without analyzing some of its problems or reinventing its core goodness for a new world. It was just, let's just make a substandard Mega Man game and slap the guy's name on it. I forget his name, but
It's always interesting to consider, though, as games aren't just made in a vacuum, and it's very much a product of its time.
oh yeah,
And so there's obviously things that reflect in it, and I think that what you were saying with Doom having that core sort of gameplay loop and what makes it great, but then revitalizing it in a modern context, because not only has obviously graphics have gotten better and things like that, but game design, the elements of it and how to flow in different levels and stuff, that's all been expanded too. And
Yeah.
so, Theo, my next question is for you personally, what game series would you like to see be brought back?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Like it's hard because like a lot of the games this series that I really, really like went in on as a kid were Nintendo games, and so they kind of never went away. So like Pokemon, wouldn't know what it's like not to have that around. It's always there. Boy, what would I like to bring back from the dead? Goodness, I don't know.
There's just too many. There's so many games out there that could potentially be brought back, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Nintendo specifically, because you said like it's never really gone away, but is there any game, let's just say in earlier on in the series, that you would like to see as a remaster or like a reboot sort of thing?
Like, I would like it if they like the main one I keep thinking about is like Pokemon, right? And like I don't know if about a remaster, but I would like them to just completely revamp how they do the stories. Like, because their stories suck. Like, there's no two ways about it. The stories suck, and what I wish they would do is just like, okay, let's get rid of like the one singular long narrative structure. Let's just break that up into lots and lots of little episodic stories, which I think would work a lot better because they don't have to like have one continuous narrative thread. They just have to have loose themes that connect all these little chunks. And
like an MCU almost.
Yeah, and then they could do it something which is much closer to the actual Pokemon show, where like this week Ash has run into a group of Beedrill and he's going to save the not Beedrill from being stung by the Beedrill and stuff like that, right? Which is closer to like the actual TV show, right? Because as a kid, I remember being like, the games are very different from the TV show. That's where I'd like to make that. That's how I would reboot Pokemon if it went away for more than 3 seconds.
Now, we also asked that question to you on different social medias, and we did actually get some responses of what series that you would like to return. On Instagram, we had the happy little skeleton saying Resistance, and then Samurai with Star Wars Pod Racing, which I'm very excited is having just a remaster on Switch coming out sometime eventually. On Pixel Sift Discord, we had L Logical with Titanfall and the War for Cybertron series. We had quite a few different responses. Thank you everyone for replying. It was awesome to see what games you wanted to come back. But I think that's a good place to end the topic here. And coming up very soon, we're going to be chatting with Theo about his game, Karna.
Hey Mitch.
Yep.
You know, there is multiple ways that you can subscribe to Pixel Sift.
Oh, yeah? How's that?
You could subscribe on your podcast player of choice if you like audio-only versions.
Like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts?
Or even Google Play if you're in the US. Or you can jump on Twitch and you can give us a follow. Or on YouTube if you like the video versions.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know we were on so many things.
Yep, and you will get a handy little notification as soon as there's a new episode for you to watch or listen to.
Wow, I'm going to do that right now.
I'm sure you will, Mitch, because you're a good boy.
So today we're joined by Theo Kipen from Not Dead Design, and he's joining us this evening to talk all about their new game called Karna Quest. So just to begin with, for those who may not know, could you tell us what is Karna Quest?
So Karna Quest is a kawaii kind of match 'em up, but it plays a bit like Dominoes crossed with a match 3 game, but it also teaches you how to read Japanese. So it's a puzzle game at its core. It just incidentally is educational.
So what was the inspiration behind Karna Quest? Because that's a really cool idea of making it like educational with teaching different hiragana and katakana as well.
Basically, I was working sometimes as a Japanese tutor for a kid in year 7, and I was also working a miserable telephone sales job. And while I was on my telephone sales job, I was like, how do I get this kid to actually study and use flashcards? Because flashcards are kind of your best way to learn your hiragana and your katakana. And so I initially came up with this idea of like, oh, why don't I create a game where like the hiragana are the game pieces and they're connecting up by their sounds. Like the original, like the first prototype I did with myself just as a paper prototype was actually a sort of area control strategy game, kind of like chess or Go. But after like sitting down with myself and playing, it's just like there's so much going on the board, and like you can't discern any of like the strategy because there's too much information. It would be impossible for someone who didn't know the letters to play this. So I pared it down into like a puzzle game.
So in the context of Karna Quest, there's over 300 puzzles.
Yeah.
What's the process of creating just one level, and especially as refining it down from the strategy game, as you said, into something a little bit more manageable for players?
Well, like the puzzles these days, like there's absolutely nothing resembling how the gameplay would have been with the strategy game. Usually what I will do is it depends on what level I'm making, if that makes any sense. So generally the structure of each world is, okay, new mechanic is introduced in. We'll give you 1 to 6 to 8 levels of just the new mechanic for you to figure out, get to grips with. And then after those couple of introductory levels, I will start adding in some of the old mechanics in, and usually it's just one old mechanic and the new mechanic and seeing how they interact. And usually what I'll try to do is I'll sort of follow a pretty standard design principle from some of the Super Mario games, where it's like, test out the concept. Here's the concept again, but a little bit more tricky. And then here's the concept a third or fourth time, but we're going to put it on its head and make you rethink how you behave with this interaction. So a good example of that would be like in like World 4, when you have the ice Kana, which keep moving. They just keep moving until they can't make a valid move. And the one-way Kana, which can only move in one direction. So there'll be like the first time you see those two kind of interacting with each other, I force you to be like, oh, okay, you're using the one-way Kana to stop the iced Kana's movement and get them into position. And over the course of the next several levels, I add to that and add more complexity to that and get you to rethink how you're interacting with those things.
Definitely. With the nature of the puzzle game too, it's that when Mitch and I both played it, at the start we were just kind of moving tiles everywhere and just seeing where it would go. But it definitely rewards you for actually understanding what is going on. And a thing that I liked a mechanic was the mystery Kana. And so the one that had like a little question mark and you had to pair it and you had to get it right. Otherwise it would count towards your move set.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you balance puzzle versus language mechanics? And is there a fine line there that you're trying to cross?
It's an incredibly fine line. You have no idea. So the way in which to get that line that you want to have happen, you do need to make some sacrifices. And the first thing you need to do is you need to sacrifice the amount of content that you're teaching. So for the rule set that I had, which was like matching sounds between letters, I basically had to say, sorry words, you're not going to work within this rule set. Sorry kanji, you're not going to work within this rule set. Sorry grammar, you're definitely not going to work within this rule set. Get out. So that's the first thing you have to do. So you kind of have to, maybe if like I had a $1 budget, I could have what is essentially kind of quest as like a mini game for a large game. But that's still like one person's 3-year job, just making the mini game for a large game, right? So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to pare down what you're actually trying to teach with the content. Secondly, with the content that you do keep, you have to make the content the means of how you achieve your goal, not the end. So what I mean by that is, in Duolingo, for example, the end, the thing you're trying to get, is the answer, and the answer is the knowledge, right? So if I were to write a character here, and it appears on your screen, and you're all like, okay, what is this Kana? It's both, the knowledge is both the means to the solution of this level and the end. It's your goal. Whereas Kana Quest, or what I think are the most interesting educational games, so I think Carmen Sandiego, the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, is one which does this as well, is the knowledge of the world in Carmen Sandiego is not the end goal. The end goal is to capture Carmen Sandiego. It's just that knowledge of the world is the means in which you capture her, and it gives you the information to proceed through the game. Kana Quest tries to do that in the same way. So, like, if at any point you don't know what a Kana is, you just double tap it any time, and it gives it to you. There's no punishment. It's like, here it is. I think that's really, really important. And then the final step, and the hardest one, is making sure that the mechanics that you've built around your content, so that they are the means and not the end, are good. And that can be tough and tricky, especially when with languages where things are not necessarily regular. You've got weird irregularities. So most letters in the Japanese alphabet, they've got a consonant followed by a vowel, but there's like a handful that just behave a little differently, and I had to rats, I'm gonna have to figure a way to make this work. So
thanks for watching Pixel Sift. If you're just joining on, we're talking to Theo Kipen from Not Dead Design about their game Kana Quest. And Theo, one thing, when you look at the game straight away, you can already tell the art style and the love and care that was put into it. Could you tell us more about how that was developed, and also with the music?
Yeah. So visually, a lot of the inspiration visually from the game came from my time living in Japan. So I lived in a small town called Asago, Wadayama Asagoshi, which had nothing in it, but had very, very beautiful mountains. And something which I really loved about Japan is there's a sense of age and wear to everything. And I don't mean like everything feels worn down and dilapidated. I mean like just your average building feels as though it has an amount of history or time. And that's just not something you get in Australia. I don't know how the best way of explaining it, but
There's a lot of history wherever you go in Japan. Like even the smallest thing, you can tell it's like it's got some story to it.
yeah. And so there was a very sense of like things are worn but not worn down. I don't know how to explain that. So everything feels kind of old but also new, and it's in a weird contradictory fashion. So I wanted to capture that. But also, especially when you see games that are about Japan, especially from Western developers, they tend to fall into like two broad visual camps. You have "我々は侍とninja de gozaimasu," like samurai and ninja, like calligraphy everywhere type aesthetic. And then はい、皆さん、これはアニメのおっぱいのイメージです。Hi everyone. This game has anime boob visuals. Like those are the two big camps that I sort of felt everything was falling into, and I wanted to be like, I want to do something a little different. And so I tried to like, okay, this is real world Japan. I want to capture that sense of oldness and weirdly newness at the same time. So to try to capture that, I chose pixel art, because pixel art is both feels very retro and very new. It's a very modern art form, but in the context of video games, it's old. And then the final sort of visual ingredient was adding in the little faces on the Kana, which was a riff on sort of Japanese mascot characters, because every town and every school has its own mascot character. And the final thing was like with the music was I wanted to sort of capture that sort of sense of Japanese musical styles. So it had to have chiptune elements to match the visuals, the pixel art. But I also wanted to show some of like Japanese musical styles that you just don't hear. So I wanted to have J-pop in there and sort of modern Japanese game music in there, but I also wanted to have a style called enka, which is a post-war Japanese pop music. If you've ever heard the song Sukiyaki is the Western name, the Japanese name is Ue Mute Aruko. That's probably the most famous example of enka. It's the only Japanese song to ever get #1 on the American charts.
Oh, cool.
But it's very sort of like traditional Japanese vocals, but with some weird jazz notes, and it's a trip. You know enka when you're hearing enka. And I tried to get a lot of the earlier, I didn't compose the music, I asked my composers to do this, but I asked them to try to capture that sort of sense of early Japanese music. And the other element was it had to be a lot of the music had to be pretty calming and chill, because if the music drew too much attention to itself, then the player would spend more time focusing on the music and not the puzzles. And when the puzzle is actually quite mentally involved, you can't bear that brain space to the music. So yeah, I had one composer who was specialized in doing jazz sort of sounds, and there's surprisingly a large amount of jazz in Japan. And he was very good at doing like very chill, very relaxed beats. And the other composer, she was the only person out of all the applicants who had any understanding about Japanese song progression. Turns out she grew up in Japan, so funny that. Yeah, and then I got to serendipitously say no to anyone who had put a gong in any of their music that they sent me.
Now, the game has been out for a few weeks, so what has the reception been like for players?
The players who played it like it a fair bit. The overall like sales figures could have been better, but the people who played it seemed to like it. That the reviews we got back from game reviewers was pretty dang positive. Like our worst review was a 7 out of 10, and our best one was a 9 out of 10. So I'm not going to complain there. Yeah, there are definitely things I could have done better. My main regret is like on the marketing side. I think I could have done a much better job of selling the game on that front. But look, I think the people who get it and play it, they seem to be getting a fair amount of it out of it, and they're enjoying it. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, definitely. It's I had a lot of fun playing it with Mitch, and I felt like by the end I'd learned a whole bunch that I didn't going into it, and I think that's the whole point of the game. So it's effective on that front.
Yeah, and like I hope that it inspires like 1 or 2 people to stick with their Japanese afterwards and do some proper classes. And like one of like the weirder design decisions that I made was I wanted the game to behave a bit like the best primary school teacher you've ever had. So like patient, doesn't punish you for not knowing things, makes learning fun. But ultimately, with the best primary school teacher you ever had, you leave them behind because you need to go on and learn new things. And unfortunately, Kana Quest, like it's hiragana and katakana. It's the very first step for learning Japanese, and I don't want players spending years on Kana Quest. I want them to like spend a good month playing through the levels, and then they played the levels. It's time to move on to learning new things in Japanese. So that was sort of a weird design decision that I made. That I don't know if anyone noticed, but it was a conscious choice.
Definitely. We've also got a question from Pretty Fly for a Shy Guy on Twitch. And she says, do you plan on making similar Kana Quest games in the future?
Probably not in the near future. Maybe if Kana Quest starts selling way more than it has been selling all of a sudden, sure, why not? But realistically, it's not going to be anytime soon. And the other thing is like just thinking on terms of scale. It took me 3 years by myself, and then my programmer Ruben, who was in on your stream a few weeks back, to make this game. And we were just teaching hiragana and katakana, so that's 92 characters in total. Let's say we were to do kanji. Let's say we just do the first 500 kanji, because that's the amount of kanji you need to do VC in Australia. That's still 4 times the amount of content that we'd have to do for kanji. And what's more, for kanji, we'd have to do a completely different rule set because kanji is not hiragana. Those two things don't gel. I'd have to make a completely new rule set for that game. And the same would go for learning vocabulary or grammar. So while I do have ideas for mechanics for all those content, those different chunks of Japanese content, the viability of making it is unlikely.
Well, that's all about what we have time for today. But thank you so much, Theo, for joining us and telling us all about Kana Quest.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you for watching or listening to episode 143 of Pixels. This episode has been hosted by myself and Daniel. Thanks for joining me tonight, Daniel.
Thanks, Fiona.
So Pixel Sift is produced by Scott Quigg, Sarah Ireland, myself, Mitchell Lowe, Daniel Ang, and Gianni Giovanni is our executive producer. So as always, we'll be sticking links to the topics we talked about in the show notes on our website, which is at www.pixelsift.com.au.
And, while you're there, you can also come and join us on Discord. We'd love to have you. That's pixelsift.com.au/Discord, where you can share your creative work, talk about topics and games and anything else. So pixelsift.com.au/Discord. And you know what? If you like what we do, can we please ask you for a favor? We need your help to share the show, so please tell a friend, subscribe your brothers and sisters, start someone's journey into podcasts, because we know that getting started is tricky, but once you're in, you're going to love it too much to leave.
So our next episode will be recorded live on twitch.tv/PixelSift on Thursday the 16th of April at 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So you can come and join us and be part of the episode. But next week, on Thursday 9th of April, it will be Pixel Sift Players, where we play one of the many indie games that feature on our show. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.